I said, I need to prove this to myself. I had used all of this infrastructure around me as a crutch. I had never been in the in the wilderness alone, naked, afraid. I had to do it. And so when I made this decision, I did this other crazy decision. I took $1.5 billion and I said, here's of my money. Fund 4, this is it. I'm on the hook every single dollar now. I have to figure out what to do with. In the first year, the executive team was Zuckerberg, Matt Kohler, me, this guy Owen Van Natta, this guy
from Amazon.
Yeah, from Amazon. Gideon Yu, who was who had just
29ers later.
He had been the CFO of YouTube, and then had taken a job as a partner at Sequoia, and then untaken the job to join us at Facebook. And a couple of other people. And there was a lot of executive churn at the time, people coming in, people coming out. And I went off to sort of try to help invent the ad business and a bunch of other modalities, including the platform business of Facebook. And in the process of that, we invented some really compelling technology, and you can Google the patents, but if you look at the patents that we were awarded in that period, me, Zuck, a handful of others, but it's a lot of the fundamental underpinnings of Web 2.0. You know, how do you actually do cross-site communications? How do you actually inject JavaScript into somebody else? All the security guys are freaking out, but I get it. At the time, we all trusted each other, so it was like, it's fine, this is going to happen. But because none of these things were solved problems at the time. So we had to go and solve these things. And in doing that, we implemented an advertising system that we called Social Actions, where the idea is that you would be perusing a website off of Google. We invented a cookie. We invented the first cookie, okay? We would kind of like cache all this information and we would generate this ad for you. Well, lo and behold, everybody freaked out. There was a person who was browsing engagement rings, and then it showed up on his girlfriend's newsfeed. John is buying an engagement ring at Zales. Then there was a guy that had bought a ticket on a movie to a movie that had offended his coworkers or something. Long and the short of it was we ended up getting sued by like 13 state attorneys general, and we were accused of stealing information or whatever. And I tried to go to the New York Times to try to explain it, and that backfired. So it was a moment of deep skepticism and negativity internally, both about me and my effectiveness and my role, but also the company. How could we make money? How do we move beyond ads? And so I said, okay, I'm going to throw this Hail Mary. There's a guy on my team, Alex Schultz, who is now the CMO, who said, Chamath, we need to think about how we grow this business and make back some of this theoretical damage. And I sat with Alex and he explained a lot of this stuff to me. And look, a lot of my life is being lucky enough to be around these smart people, where for me, it's about taking what they say, embracing it and extending it a little bit more. And what we developed was this idea of having a hyper-aggressive approach to expanding the network and the density of the graph. And I went and I pitched it at the board. And I said, and then I remember the day before or something, Cheryl called me and we walked through the plan. She's like, well, what are you going to call this thing? Because we need to name this thing. And it's like, I don't know, we have to grow this thing because it's not growing. And she said, okay, you'll be the VP of growth. And I said, okay. And that's how it started. So very humble beginnings. And in the first 6 or 9 months, Oren, nothing happened, because I would bring a team about half the size of this team together, engineers, product managers, designers. And every Wednesday I would say, okay, what experiments did you run? What have you figured out? And for the first 6 months, it was much of nothing. And so it didn't feel like things were working. And then all of a sudden, just the things started to accumulate. And we learned, look, Albert Einstein said, the greatest thing that's really been invented is compound interest, right? Like this really the eighth wonder of the world. And we saw it in real time in front of our eyes. 10 basis points here, 5 basis points there, 7 basis points here. And my mind clicked because that made sense to me. Probabilistically, more of an investing mindset. So it really became, to me, the next 3 years was purely about me allocating capital, I felt like. I'm an investor. I'm making bets. Some things become unicorns. Something becomes duds. And it manifested in a bunch of different products. A lot of it ended up working. And then, it came to a point where I said, and then obviously I got in the way of some things as well. And it was a moment to decide I either stay and invest, which was a complicated decision to say no to because there was a lot of money on the table, or I leave, and I chose to leave. As Dave Chappelle said, I got off the bus.
But on good terms at that point.
At that point, it was great. What had happened was we had tried to build a phone, and I had taken a team off to go and build an operating system and an actual physical implementation, and like a physical form factor. It was quite unique in the moment, but it was caught up in a lot of my own issues as a human being and trying to come to terms with the fact that, to be very honest, this is ultimately Zuck's company and his decisions, and I mattered, but really not that much, and I had to really internalize that was true, and that if I wanted to have my real stamp and make decisions, it would have to be my own thing. And so I asked them if they would support me to leave. They were very kind. They gave me some initial capital, and then I raised a bunch more, and I started Social Capital. And it's been amazing. These last 12 years have been really, truly amazing. I didn't believe in myself. And I fundamentally, and this goes to explain why some of the people that sent you an email, they can take a snapshot of me and say, I don't like that guy. But what they're seeing probably in that moment is me feeling really insecure about myself and saying or doing something to try to just get attention. But really it's an attempt for me to make myself feel better. And so when I started as a kid with 0 credentials, immigrant to the United States, I didn't go to Harvard, I didn't go to Stanford, I didn't have any of these things. I thought I needed to look like everybody else in order to succeed. And so the first version of Social Capital was my attempt to copy everybody else. And so, when you first met me, I thought, okay, well, I don't have an MBA, so I need to recruit somebody with an MBA. I don't have these connections to traditional LPs. I need to have that. I wanted to go and invest in, Bitcoin in 2011. But instead I was, doing very traditional. People were asking me, what's the next app after Instagram? And then at some point I said, no, I got to really start to do this for myself. And so I started to make these small bets, which really spoke to my own internal voice. And when those things started to work out, I had the courage to really stick to that. And that's a really important challenge. It's both a challenge for the entrepreneur and the investor, because you get signals that will always... Startups by definition are heterodoxical, because if it was already solved and it was already part of the common logic, the lingua franca of how the world works, you would not have an opportunity. So by definition, you are going to have an entire system that tells you this isn't working. An investor is the same thing, because now you have to identify with those people and those ideas that are, again, heterodoxical and off to the fringes, and figure out a way to embrace it and move it into the center. So you have very few moments where you feel like the signal is true, and an infinite number of occasions where everybody is telling you you're wrong. So what do you do? And that is a process that I was able to go through. And you need those feedback loops. You need to fail quickly enough, and you need to get enough successes early enough to give you confidence, at least for me, because I didn't have the intestinal fortitude to stick it out. I would have crumbled to the will of the masses without it. At one point in 2011, I owned 5% of all the Bitcoins in circulation. And I thought to myself, I sound like an idiot. And I went to Mike Bloomberg, who is a mentor of mine. I said, can I write this op-ed for you? And he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Bitcoin, I have no idea what this is, just write it. And I was like, everybody should basically have 1% of their portfolio allocated to this. And I just remember how dumb I was made to feel whenever I went to New York. And every time I would go on CNBC in the early 2000s, you can see these clips on YouTube. They treated me so poorly, and I had to defend myself almost as a person. They would show this clip of Charlie Munger and Gates and Buffett, who are my heroes. Not Gates so much, but Buffett and Munger are my heroes, saying that stuff is like rat poison. And then, you're a rat poison. And you have to defend yourself. You know how hard that is? It's really, really hard. I still don't. And I think that this is the journey of the person who is trying to achieve a lot is, unfortunately, as I've seen it, really, really well-balanced people don't necessarily believe that there's such a need to keep achieving. And I think that they find happiness much better. I'm sure you have friends like that. I have friends like that. I'm very envious of them. The reason I keep going after this phantom ghost that I'm chasing is because I don't believe in myself. And I think that if I slay that ghost or if I achieve that thing, it will solve all the problems. And I know the joke. The joke is that it doesn't solve anything, but I keep chasing it. So, I don't know what that means. I'm still running on the treadmill. But I'm at least more conscious of that and those trade-offs. I kind of justify it to myself as, what else would I do? And I think that that's okay. But it explains why a lot of folks are just become so maniacally driven. They're trying to fill a hole inside them. And I'm trying to learn how to look at my kids and have them fill my hole, to look at my wife and have it fill my hole. It's just, that sounded bad. You know what I'm trying to say? You know what I mean? That's what I mean. Basically, the way that investing works is there's momentum investing. That could be a lot of Silicon Valley in the 2000s, I think 2010s, okay? Then there's sort of like P&L investing. You look at cash flows, money in, money out. Then there's macro investing, which is really about how these systems of government and institutions work together. And then there's the philosophical investing, where the absolute greats don't care about any of this stuff. They see a philosophy. They have a system. And I think Stan is one of those guys. So the point is, when you looked at guys like that, they were constantly moving. And they were constantly pushing themselves to retool their skill set. And what they were really good at was managing risk, entry point, making sure that you generated returns. And so I said, I need to prove this to myself. I had used all of this infrastructure around me as a crutch. I had never been in the in the wilderness alone, naked, afraid. I had to do it. And so when I made this decision, I did this other crazy decision. I took $1.5 billion and I said, here's of my money. Fund 4, this is it. I'm on the hook every single dollar now. I have to figure out what to do with. And the craziest thing happened. The returns in the last 3 years have been better than all the other funds before it.
Not surprised, given my experience.
And they were bigger. So the funds were bigger. The returns were better. And so it proved